The fireproof mineral, lost to fire.
Run that back.
Okay. 1828. Someone, we don't know who, files the first American patent for asbestos insulation. Wrapping steam engines in rock that doesn't burn. Brilliant idea. Changed everything.
And we don't know who.
Because in 1836, the U.S. Patent Office burned down 9,957 patents. 8 years of American invention gone.
Including the asbestos guy.
History remembers the product, not the person.
That's going to become a pattern.
It is.
Asbestos, a conspiracy 4,500 years in the making, is brought to you by Danziger and Diano, a nationwide mesothelioma law firm. For over 30 years, they've helped families facing an asbestos diagnosis understand their options and find answers. If you or someone you love is dealing with mesothelioma, visit dandell.com. That's DANDELL.com.
Before we go further, I want to do something we haven't done before.
Which is?
Step back, show you the map. Because this episode, episode 10, marks a turning point, not just in the story, but in how we're telling it.
A milestone.
If you've been with us since episode 1, you've now heard 9 episodes spanning 4,500 years. And if you're just joining us, welcome. You can start here. But I want to show you where we've been.
The full picture.
We've been telling this story in arcs. Each arc covers a different era. Each arc asks a different question about how asbestos went from geological curiosity to industrial catastrophe.
Arcs, that's new.
Arc 1 was Ancient Origins, episodes 1 through 6. The question, did the ancients know asbestos was deadly?
Spoiler, they didn't.
They couldn't have, but that's the conclusion. Here's how we got there. Episode 1, Finnish pottery fragments from 2700 BCE, the oldest evidence of humans using asbestos. Episode 2, the ancient Greeks encounter a rock that doesn't burn. Pausanias, describing a golden wick that never needs replacing. Episode 3, religious uses, temple lamps, the idea that something fireproof must be holy.
The beginning of the myth.
Episode 4 was the big myth bust. Everyone cites Pliny the Elder. Roman workers wore bladder masks because they knew asbestos was deadly.
Pliny.
We went back to the Latin. He was describing cinnabar workers, mercury miners, different mineral, different chapter, wrong citation repeated for a century.
Same with Strabo.
His sickness of the lungs was about arsenic mines, not asbestos. Episode 5. Why did asbestos stay rare for 4,000 years? Trade routes, luxury pricing, a Roman text comparing asbestos prices to exceptional pearls.
Too expensive to kill people with.
Exactly. And episode 6, the archaeological record, no mesothelioma in ancient remains. The evidence for what they actually knew, which wasn't very much.
Arc 1's conclusion?
The ancients couldn't have. The exposure was too rare. The latency period, 20 to 50 years, was too long. Their lifespans were too short. You can't connect cause and effect when everyone dies of something else first.
And then we jumped forward, medieval.
Arc 2, Medieval Myths and Renaissance Confusion, episodes 7 through 9. The question, how did asbestos become racked in legend and who profited? The Letter of Prester John, a 12th century forgery. Con artists selling holy relics. The Charlemagne tablecloth story.
Which turned out to be completely fabricated.
First appears 1,000 years after Charlemagne died? No contemporary source mentions it. Episode 8, Marco Polo, 1298. He actually visits an asbestos mine in China, explicitly writes, "This is a rock, not a salamander."
And nobody believes him.
Because he was a merchant, and the encyclopedias were written by scholars who'd never left Europe. Episode 9, Thomas Brown finally kills the salamander myth, 1646.
It dieth immediately therein.
You love that line.
I really do.
350 years after Marco Polo said the same thing. So that's 9 episodes, 4,500 years of asbestos's curiosity, rare, expensive, wrapped in legend. And then
we get to Arc 3.
Arc 3, the Industrial Revolution. And this is where everything changes. We spent 9 episodes on 4,500 years. The next 5 episodes about 100 years, 1828 to the 1920s.
Tighter focus.
Much tighter, because in that century, asbestos goes from rare enough to fool medieval royalty to cheap enough to wrap every steam pipe in America.
The mines open.
Quebec, Russia, South Africa. Production explodes. By 1900, Quebec alone is producing 10,000 tons a year.
From how much?
1878, 50 tons.
200 times in 22 years.
In 22 years, and for the first time in human history, large numbers of people start breathing it every day for decades.
So we have better records now. Industrial age, paper trails.
Yes and no. We have meticulous records of production volumes, patent filings, corporate mergers, stock prices.
But
the workers, the people in the mines and factories, almost nothing.
nothing?
We searched academic databases, government archives, Quebec provincial records, and here's what we found for the entire 19th century. No wage rates, no working hours, no injury records from the mines, no newspaper accounts of conditions.
How is that possible?
Because workers were illiterate, because there were no unions yet, because their lives weren't considered historically important, because, and this matters, there was no one whose job it was to count them.
And the conspiracy?
The conspiracy doesn't start with what companies knew. It starts with who they didn't bother counting. The bodies were always there. Someone just had to decide they mattered. Let's talk about scale. Before the 1800s, asbestos manufacturing was artisanal. A German physician spinning it into cloth, Italian craftsmen making paper, the Paris Opera installing a fire curtain backstage.
One-offs.
Curiosities, maybe a few dozen people exposed in any given year. Then, the Industrial Revolution needed steam.
And steam means pressure.
Here's the calculus. The higher the pressure, the more efficient the engine. The more efficient the engine, the more money you make. So owners push the pressure up.
Until something gives.
Boilers. The Industrial Revolution runs on steam, and steam means pressure, and pressure means
Explosions.
1853, New York. A man named Thomas Riley is walking home in broad daylight, smoking his pipe. His wife is standing at their door watching him come up the street.
Okay.
A boiler explodes. Not on his street, a different street. A piece of metal flies through the air, hits him in the head. He dies 2 days later.
And the coroner says,
Blamed a man in Canada who built the boiler. Couldn't identify him. Didn't matter. Accidental death.
Of course.
By 1880, 159 boiler explosions in a single year. Over 2,000 in the next decade. People scalded, crushed, hit by flying metal blocks away from the blast.
So they needed a solution.
They needed insulation, something that could wrap a boiler, hold the heat in, keep the pressure stable, and not catch fire.
Asbestos.
The miracle fix. Expose workers to the insulation instead of exposing bystanders to explosions.
Traded one way of dying for another.
Except boiler explosions killed dozens per year. Asbestos would kill hundreds of thousands.
the cure was worse than the disease.
By orders of magnitude, and nobody would connect those deaths for another 50 years.
So someone looks at a steam engine and thinks,
What if we wrapped it in rock that doesn't burn?
1828. Name unknown.
Lost to fire.
Speaking of tracing things back, that's what the team at Danziger and Diano does. If you're looking for answers about where an exposure happened, dandel.com.
1876. Quebec. A farmer named Joseph Fecteau is picking blueberries.
Blueberries?
According to the story, and I want to be clear, this is the story as it gets told, Fecteau takes a break from cutting hay, wanders into a field, notices a greenish rock with unusual fibers.
And he just scrapes it with his fingernail?
with his fingernail, or his pocket knife depending on who's telling it, shows the sample to a man named Roger Ward. Ward has it analyzed.
And?
Asbestos. Chrysotile. White gold, they'll call it later.
Hold on. According to the story.
Right, this is where I need to flag something. We searched for a primary source on the Blueberry story. A contemporary newspaper account, a letter, a geological survey report from the 1870s or 1880s. And nothing. The first documented appearance of the Blueberry detail is from the 2000s, over a century after it supposedly happened.
So it might be true.
It might be true. The core facts check out. Fecteau existed, the discovery was 1876, Ward purchased mining rights, but the narrative details, the blueberries, the fingernail, that has hallmarks of retrospective mythology, the kind of origin story companies like to tell.
Like John's using his wife's tea kettle.
Exactly like that. We'll get there.
Follow the story back to its source.
Always. Here's what we can verify. June 8th, 1878. Johnson Brothers obtain mining rights in Thetford Township, Lot 27, Range 6. That's documented.
What about Ward?
Roger Ward, and this is interesting, wasn't an Irish fur trader like some sources claim. Land records show he was born in Lower Ireland Township, Quebec, not Ireland, the country, Lower Ireland Township. Had logging rights in the area.
They saw Lower Ireland and stopped reading.
Same mistake as plenty.
Different century, same laziness.
Romanticized. He purchased 218 acres at $1 an acre, sold about 100 acres to the Boston Asbestos Packing Company for $4,000.
From $218 to $4,000 in 2 years.
And that's before the real money. By 1881, the Jeffrey Mine opens. By 1889, the Quebec Central Railway reaches Thetford Mines.
So they can ship it out.
At scale. We can tell you exactly how many tons of asbestos left Thetford Mines in 1889. We cannot tell you a single worker's name.
They had accountants.
Very good accountants.
Just nobody counting coffins.
By the 1890s, U.S. prices dropped from $128 a ton to $30 a ton. Canadian supply flooded the market.
And a lot of workers going into those mines, so we have production volumes, shipping records, corporate history.
All documented, meticulously.
And the workers?
I found photographs, 4, maybe 5, from the entire 19th century. Dates uncertain, one from 1919 showing women and children.
Children?
Cobbers, that was the term. They hand-sorted ore with hammers, separated the asbestos fibers from the rock.
No protective equipment.
None documented. No dust control measures documented. No injury records.
And we're supposed to believe nobody noticed they were getting sick?
The latency period for asbestos diseases is 20 to 50 years. A worker exposed in 1880 wouldn't show symptoms until 1900 or later, by which point
They might be dead of something else or just gone.
and nobody was tracking them anyway. The bodies were always there, but if no one's job was to count them,
Then they don't exist in the historical record.
they exist, just not in writing.
Lost to fire, lost to nobody writing anything down.
Same result.
The team at Danziger and Diano has spent 30 years finding the records that do exist, tracing exposures, connecting the dots between a diagnosis and a job site. If you're looking for answers, dandel.com. That's DANDELL.com.
While Quebec is transforming into the asbestos capital of the world, something's happening in New York.
Let me guess, somebody's filing a patent.
1858, a 21-year-old named Henry Ward Johns rents a basement in New York City. And according to company legend, and again, this is company legend,
I'm bracing.
he uses his wife's clothes wringer and tea kettle to process asbestos into roofing material.
The tea kettle.
The story appears only on the Johns Manville corporate website, the 1868 trade catalog, no mention of any tea kettle, no contemporary source documents it.
Same pattern with the blueberries.
Every company origin story has a garage or a kitchen appliance. Apple started in a garage. Amazon started in a garage.
And asbestos started with a tea kettle and some blueberries.
It's never, I had capital and a business plan.
Always humble, pastoral, a farmer, a basement, a wife's kitchen equipment.
Charming origin story that emerges decades later. What we can verify 1868, Johns files a real patent, patent number 76,773. Improvement in compounds for roofing and other purposes. Mix asbestos powder with lime and water, create fire-resistant roofing compound.
That one has a number.
And Johns builds a company, H.W. Johns Manufacturing. By the 1880s, he's one of the largest asbestos manufacturers in America. Fire-resistant shingles, insulation, pipe coverings.
Success story.
Until 1898.
What happens in 1898?
Henry Ward Johns dies. Cause of death, according to multiple sources, probable asbestosis, dust phthisis pneumonitis in the language of the time.
The founder of the American asbestos industry.
Died from asbestos exposure from his own product.
Did anyone notice?
Here's what happened next. The company merged with Manville, became Johns Manville, got bigger.
So the answer is no.
The product worked, the product sold. The founder was dead from breathing it.
That's the whole conspiracy in miniature.
The man who invented the industry, killed by the industry, and the industry just kept going. What the corporations did with the warnings that were already public, that's next episode. So that's where we are. 1898, the industry exists, the product works, the founder is dead from breathing it.
And the workers?
The bodies are beginning to accumulate, but there's no one to count them. Not yet.
When does that change?
1899. London. A 33-year-old man walks into Charing Cross Hospital complaining of bronchitis. He's been working in an asbestos textile factory for 14 years, started at 19.
Okay.
He tells the doctor, a physician named H. Montague Murray, that all of his coworkers have died, 10 of them, all in their 30s, all previously healthy, all the same symptoms.
He knew.
He knew something was killing them. He just didn't know what. A year later, he's dead too. Murray does the autopsy, finds heavy scarring in the lungs and asbestos fibers embedded in the tissue.
The first documented case.
Someone with medical authority finally writes it down. 1900. The bodies had been accumulating for decades. It just took that long for anyone to connect them.
Next time, the corporate architects.
Episode 11.
10 episodes. We've covered 4,500 years of asbestos as curiosity and myth, and now we're watching it become something else.
An industry.
An industry that didn't count its workers, that kept meticulous records of production volumes and none of injury rates, that let the bodies accumulate in silence.
Until someone started writing them down.
If you're listening to this and thinking about someone, a parent, a spouse, yourself, who worked in one of those industries where nobody kept records of what the workers breathed?
The company records exist. Production volumes, shipping manifests, insurance policies. The paper trail is there.
Someone just has to know where to look and what to do with it.
Paul Danziger and Rod Diano have spent 30 years turning that documentation into cases, finding where the exposure happened, holding the companies accountable.
The asbestos industry spent a century not counting workers. This firm has spent 3 decades making sure those workers count now.
Dave Foster, Anna Jackson, the whole team help families navigate what comes next while the attorneys build the case.
Dandel.com. That's Dandell.com.
Dandel.com. That's Dandell.com.
Next week, episode 11, The Corporate Architects.
Arc 3, we made it.
Industrial era. This is where it gets heavy, isn't it?
Lots of numbers. Production volumes, patent numbers.
The horror of spreadsheets.
Ledgers.
The horror of ledgers. Doesn't have the same ring.
It's what they had.
They counted every ton.
Every last one.
Just not the people who moved them. Okay, lighter topic. Blueberries.
The blueberries are a nice touch, right?
Very pastoral for an industry that would kill millions.
That's origin myths for you. Tea kettles and blueberries.
Never dust and coughing. Never my lungs hurt.
Doesn't make for good company lore.
Patent number 76,773, though. That's real.
Improvement in compounds for roofing and other purposes.
The most boring title imaginable.
For a product that would kill more people than the Civil War. On both sides, combined.
Well, thanks for that, Debbie Downer.
Sorry, maybe we should cut that.
No, leave it in. We're done?
We're done.
Good episode.
Good episode.